Lee and Alfred Ezman of Southeastern 14 here to talk more super regionals in the NCAA baseball tournament. We've done 3 so far, 2 to go. 1 today will be Texas A&M and Oregon. Very interesting matchup between two teams that have pitched it well recently. We will get into both teams and offer you a prediction at the end of the episode. But first, a reminder. We are brought to you by BetOnline, which is your number one source for the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup playoffs this season. Every stat, matchup, and live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game is over, head on over to our online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, run one with one of your 150 or one of their 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on all the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online where the game starts. Well, let's start in College Station, where the Aggies won a regional, not a fantastic close to the regular season, or at least the pre-NCAA tournament portion of it for the Aggies. Didn't look great in the SEC tournament where they lost both their games. Did take a series from Arkansas in Bluebell Park after losing 2 of 3 to Ole Miss the weekend before. So this was a team that was probably playing some of its worst baseball at the end of the season, but it got things back on track in a regional, really pitched it well. We usually start with the hitting, but I think both these discussions start with the pitching. For Texas A&M, Alfred, we saw Ryan Prager throw like an ace in an 8-0 win over Grambling. We saw Shane Sdao seize that starting role, and we saw a bullpen that just kind of got it done in between. This team's got so many good arms who can cover so many innings, and we're to the point where I feel like if they get something extra out of some of their guys they're marginally effective, and that may be kind in some cases towards the end of the season, this team's really playing with house money with that pitching staff, because the guys that can cover the bulk of the innings with no problems, the Rudises, the Cortezes, all the guys we already mentioned, that team is in terrific shape if those other dudes show up too.
Yeah, and they can go far. I mean, the example I probably will use for a lot of this tournament, we saw Ashenbeck against Texas go so many pitches, for a reliever. He was heading into the 60s in his pitch count, and he was able just to maintain control of that game and, play about it even when it was close and keep Texas off the base paths. And yeah, going forward, that's going to be key. We know their lineup can compete with anybody in the country. It's arguably the best lineup anybody in the country has to offer. The question was always about their pitching, and it's answered this year with great starters and just, like you said, Chris, guys who can, go the distance in relief if they need to.
Yeah, their issue has been Justin Lampkin and Tanner Jones, who were their 2 and 3 starters most of the year. Jones got removed from the rotation. Lampkin plugged back in and I think pitched decently well. But, I mean, again, those guys are just a bonus at this point because you got so many other dudes. And you mentioned the main one, Evan Ashenbeck, who just was tremendous as he was all season. A 164 earned run average in 60 1/3 innings. He only walked 8 guys all season and hit 1 guy with the pitch. That is amazing. Had a 190 batting average against. I mean, you can see the stats yourself, but this is one reason I've been so high on A&M is just because those dudes can just flat out pitch from so many places. Now, the lineup, another reason I'm so high on this team. We raved about it all year. Braden Montgomery had 27 home runs. Jace LaViolette had 28. Gavin Grahovac had 22. You had a couple of other double-digit home run hitters in Jackson Appel, who had 10, who was first-team All-SEC catcher. And Caden Sorrell was a guy that came on late. He did not start the whole year, but he was really a kid who gave them some clutch hitting late in the season and did some things in the NCAA tournament. This is a lineup. It's got everything. It's got depth. It's got power. They don't really run a lot. I mean, although Appel stole 10 bases and Ted Burton, who kind of faded a little bit late. The Michigan transfer stole 10, but this is we talk a lot about just super tough lineups to pitch to 1 through 9, and I think A&M stacks up with just about anybody in the country in that regard.
Yeah, and they have their other role guys who aren't necessarily power hitters that get the job done as well. I mean, I look at Travis Chestnut, 287 average, and, on base percentage north of 450. That's very, very solid and what A&M needs to get extra runs across. Same thing with a guy like Hayden Kent, who sometimes plays second base as well, 286 and an on base percentage north of 400. Top to bottom, and I think there's helps prove the point. Top to bottom, this team just can hit in any situation and can give you different results, whether it's the home run, extra base hits, or just even just getting onto first to start an inning or something. And it's a headache. You're gonna have to bring your A game pitching, and Oregon, we'll get into them in a sec. They can certainly do it if they put their mind to it, but it's a tough team to work against. And Louisiana, Texas, and the rest of that field in College Station during the regional, they had their work cut out for him during that, just because of A&M's flat out ability to have guys to get home runs. And yeah, their OPS is shot off the chart. Some of them, a lot of them were up over one, like Grahovac, LaViolette, and Montgomery, who's the big three and the first three in the order that are just going to deliver every time. So it's hard. They're a hard team to pitch to, and they can show that this weekend.
Yeah, I think the thing for A&M, the series April 19th through the 20th, they played 2 games on the 19th. They beat Alabama 10-5 and then 18-9, and then lost a 10-9 game. All those on the road, then beat Houston in a midweek game. Did bust out for 19 runs in the middle game against Georgia the next week. But it felt like from that point on, and again, there was a burst against LSU. They got 14, and then in the midweek game, 16 against Rice. But it feels like from that Ole Miss series on, which was starting on May the 10th, the last month, the lineup just has not raked at the phenomenal level that it did before that. Just one double-digit run game since then. Did get 8 against Grambling, but I think one thing of concern, it's not like the lineup's been bad, but A&M did not put up the video game numbers much of the last 3 weeks or so that it did earlier in the season, which is something to watch, because boy, did Oregon ever pitch in ripping through its regional and winning that one in 3 games.
They did. Yeah, we were just talking about it before we came on to do this, and they have one guy who pitched. It was actually their final game, their winning game against UC Santa Barbara, which allowed them to sweep through that regional, which is something impressive for a 3 seed to do. And Oregon, I think, looking deeper into them, they're a tough 3. I mean, they're not. It seems like they had the resume. I don't know what their RPI is off the top of my head, but it seems like they had the resume to be a higher seed in this tournament. You look 40 and 18 overall, 19 and 11 in Pac-12 play, 500 in neutral games. So they at least got it done there. And here's something impressive too, Chris: 14 and 7 on the road. Granted, that's not necessarily an SEC play. A lot of that's definitely Pac-12 games, but they can go on the road. They're road warriors. They go on the road and get it done. And I use, this is way at the beginning of the season. It's a lot different, obviously, now. But if you look at the Shriners Classic to start the year in Arlington, wins over Oklahoma. They were a tournament team. They were a host, as a matter of fact. And then over Baylor as well, who sometimes puts great baseball teams together. But yeah, I mean, going back to their pitching, they just have a ton of guys who can go the distance. And I just said it. They had a guy go a complete game. That last game against Santa Barbara, it was Kevin Seitter. He went completely 9 innings in a big-time win to get them into this point, to get them to College Station. Pretty steady. I mean, you look at him at this season, 81 and 2/3, 80 strikeouts. Walks a good bit of guys. I don't know if that's what you're going to want to do. And actually, he hits a good bit of batters, too. A lot of the top guys for Oregon, the one thing I noticed is they hit a lot of batters. They hit a few batters, and that's not necessarily something, it's not something necessarily huge, but it's something to note, because you don't want to give A&M the opportunity to get those extra runs. But they can go with him. They can go with guys like Grayson Grinsell, 3.82 ERA, 75 in the third. He had 97 strikeouts, which is good for that stretch of innings. And gave up an opposing batting average less than 200. So, and once again, I said it during some of our other previews, it's not like a regional. It's 3 games max you're going to play. So the arms you start with, Oregon's got them, and they're a team that can really, if they're on there with their pitching, A&M could possibly have some troubles.
Yeah, and A&M is not pronounced lefty or righty heavy one way or the other. It can be a little more righty heavy. Here's what I mean by that. Sorrel, LaViolette, and Hayden Schott, their DH, are all lefties. The rest of their lineup is righties, except for Braden Montgomery, who is a switch hitter. So, on some days that can be 6 righties and 3 lefties. Some days that can be 5 and 4. Oregon's makeup of its pitching staff, Seitter is a righty who was a Quinnipiac transfer. This is his 5th year play in college baseball. Grayson Grinsell, who I think was their 3rd leading guy in terms of innings, he's a lefty. They've got RJ Gordon, a starter, who went 91 and a third innings this year, had an ERA under 5. He is also a righty. And that's, look, we look at ERAs and, a 4.73 ERA used to be something we would sneeze at. Not anymore in this day and age, college baseball, where the ball gets out of the yard really, really quickly. I think having guys that are durable, their rotation, Gordon went 91 and a third. Seitter went 81 and a third. Grinsell went 75 and a third. So they've got guys that they trusted to go long lengths in the games. You look at the bullpen, and you had some interesting stuff there. Who was it? There had a guy, their closer, hit like a bunch of guys by pitches this year. Yeah, I mean, it was just, this was a staff that really, when you look at the ERAs, is Bradley Mullen, I think is who it was, 38 innings. It wasn't the hit by pitches. I'm sorry. He walked 22 guys in 38 innings, did hit 6 guys as well. And you mentioned the starting rotation did hit a lot of guys, but this was a staff that was kind of hard to hit. You look at some of the opposing batting average against some. Grinsell was a 185 against. They had a couple guys out of the bullpen that were sub 200. So I think for Oregon, it'll be kind of limiting the free passes, which is always a thing that you want to do with the Aggies, who can just flat out hit, and they will take a ton of pitches and wait till they get one and then drive them. Speaking of driving the ball, Oregon had 4 double-digit home run guys. Jacob Walsh, who hit 18, who had a 925 OPS. Mason Neville, their best hitter by OPS. He had a 1024. He hit 16 bombs. Bryce Botcher had 12 bombs and 884 OPS. And Maddox Maloney had a 1037 OPS with 10 home runs. So like a lot of other lineups in this tournament, you need to hit bombs to be competitive. And Oregon had about half of its lineup for sure that could really do that.
Yeah, and I'll continue the trend I did with Texas A&M with them. The guys who don't necessarily go for power too are very productive. You have Drew Smith at second base, 314 average, 427 on base percentage. Yeah, once again, only 3 home runs, but he has the ability, like some of A&M's, role guys, to get on base and help them out. Jeffrey Hurd, he can sometimes play right field instead of Mason Neville, who was one of those power guys. 299 average, on base percentage up near 400 as well. Yeah, I mean, they're a team that, has a lot of hitters. Once again, you see the numbers shoot into those 300s and high 200s in that sort of category. And that tells you that's a lineup that's hot. They obviously were hot. I mean, once again, they swept through Santa Barbara, and it wasn't necessarily big explosive run totals. I mean, they only had, each game it was 5, 2, and then 3. But once with their pitching, it kind of reminds me a little of Florida, Chris. I mean, their pitching was able to get it done for the most part, and then the lineup did their thing on the side, and maybe it works out as a compliment for them, and that's something that's A&M has to keep an eye on, and if A&M can break through this pitching, maybe they can get past Oregon, but Oregon has the guys, if they need to, who can hit for power, and they have the guys that can get on base just like they do.
All right, let's make predictions. Oregon has not been to a College World Series since it reinstated baseball. I don't know what it's been, 10 or 12 years ago. It's been consistently pretty good, been in a lot of regionals. This would be the 2nd straight year in a super regional. I worry a little bit about A&M not hitting the way that it did before, especially against a team that really found some pitching in a regional and has got a lot of arms who can go, who are experienced. Still, I picked the Aggies despite not having a ton of momentum coming into this thing as my national tournament or my national champion. I still believe in this team. I'm not going to go against them in this spot, but I am concerned because I think Oregon showed the blueprint last weekend in the way that it pitched to beat this team.
Yeah, I'll build off it a little bit. I do think I'm going to stick with it too, because I said at the beginning of this tournament, A&M had a favorable draw if they were to get out of College Station and get through some of the challenges they could face there, and they did. And with Santa Barbara, we didn't look as much as we could have into this regional. I'll be the first to admit that. But I said A&M can play and match up with those guys, pretty well regardless. And it was the 3 seed Oregon who came out on top. It wasn't Santa Barbara or anything like that. So maybe I still think that worked out for A&M pretty well. I do think Oregon, looking at some of their starters and their pitching, I think they have the opportunity to get a win here, and I'll say that. I do think Oregon snags a win on an off A&M night, but I do think with A&M and the draw they got, I do think in the depth that they have, they're going to be able to break through and get the series win and move on to Omaha. So I say the Aggies get the win in 3.
All right, we'll be here to wrap it up when it's over. Best way to get that, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, enable your notifications. We, of course, cover the SEC, so we know them better than we know the teams out of the league. For anybody listening that's not familiar with this, we know A&M really well. We're getting to know Oregon. So, in any case, we'll see who lasts after this weekend, and again, we'll be here to talk about it later. For Alfred Ezman, I'm Chris Lee. We are Southeastern 14, presented by BetOnline.